one of his books, motivational speaker Zig Ziglar tells the story of NFL quarterback Jeff Hostetler, who began his career with the New York Giants. And at the beginning of his career, Jeff was a backup quarterback. By the end of the 7th season of his playing, he was still a backup quarterback. He had thrown about 200 passes in the NFL over those 7 years, and not one of those passes had any meaningful significance. Imagine that. Sitting on the bench for 7 seasons and never getting into a game in a meaningful situation. Then in the 14th game of 1999, Phil Simms, the starting quarterback of the Giants, went down with a broken foot. It was a personal tragedy for Simms, who was having one of his finest seasons. And so Coach Bill Parcells looked at his bench to his backup quarterback, Jeff Hostetler, and said, "Okay, Jeff, it's your turn." And Jeff Hostetler ran out onto the field, led his team to victory that day, led his team to victory the rest of the games that season and through the playoffs, and actually aided the Giants in winning the Super Bowl over the Buffalo Bills. And Zig Ziglar tells this story, and he says, think about those 7 years of waiting. Jeff Hostetler sitting on the bench, but during the week and during the offseason, he was throwing thousands of passes to a swinging tire. He worked with his wide receivers and running backs in countless practice sessions, sharpening and honing his skills. He lifted tons of weights. He did hundreds of push-ups and sit-ups. He jogged many miles and did numerous wind sprints. He literally spent hundreds of hours poring over the playbook of his own offensive defense for his team as well as the defenses of the opposing team. And then, when Coach Parcells turned to Jeff Hostetler and said, "Okay, Jeff, it's your turn," Jeff was ready. And patiently waiting, after patiently waiting for 7 years, wondering if he was ever going to have a career, Jeff Hostetler was ready and led his team to the Super Bowl. We're beginning the season of Advent, that part of the year known as a time of preparation. It's a time for Christians to get ready. The Latin derivative of the word Advent is to come. And during these 4 weeks of Advent, we focus our attention on the coming of Jesus Christ, both at his first coming as a babe in the manger in Bethlehem, and also the second coming as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But the question is, are you ready? We will read during this season words from the prophets of an expected coming of a Messiah. We'll ponder the meaning of the texts from the New Testament that speak of Christ's return to rule and to judge and to save at the end time. But the ultimate question is, are we ready? Are we ready to receive Jesus when he appears? Make it personal. Are you ready? This morning's text is a very difficult text to first understand. It's an apocalyptic text. It speaks the truth of which the people of that day were facing, but it also speaks of the future, in particular, Jesus' second coming. Often we're tempted to ignore apocalyptic texts, especially preachers, because they make the congregants feel very uncomfortable. Not only are they difficult to understand, but sometimes we say, "Oh my gosh, is that really going to happen?" It makes us somewhat afraid. And yet we must acknowledge that Jesus spoke clearly about the second coming, and other New Testament writers emphasized it as well. So our gospel lesson here from Luke, I started reading later in the chapter, it actually begins to unfold in verses 5 and 6. Jesus predicts in that day that very soon the temple will be destroyed. The temple, that massive structure is going to be destroyed. How could that be? And so the disciples asked questions of Jesus. "Teacher, so when will all these things be? What is the sign that these things are about to happen?" And Jesus then, in the earlier part of chapter 21, responds by telling them of wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and plagues. the arrest of Christians and the destruction of Jerusalem. And then Jesus says in verse 25, where we pick up the text, there will come the cosmic signs. Listen again to what Jesus says. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, the stars, and on the earth distress among all nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. And what will that generate? For most people, it will generate fear. Now, Jesus does not say these things actually to frighten us. I think he says these things to us to prepare us. See, our proper response is not to be terrified and to shake in our boots, but to avoid being led astray by false teachers, and to take advantage of the opportunities to witness to others of God's grace and peace and love, even in the midst of life's chaos and turmoil. Jesus' purpose here is not to insulate us from discomfort, because to be honest with you, the living of our earthly lives is not always easy. Instead, Jesus' purpose is to prepare us for redemption. And Jesus does this by encouraging us to look for the signs. Our text begins with Jesus speaking of the signs, signs of the time, signs that remind people of God's promises. And actually, we live in a time when we are surrounded by signs. And every time I think about that, I remember the lyrics from that song by the five-man electrical band from the 70s. You remember that song? Sign, sign, everywhere sign, blocking out the scenery break in my mind. Do this, don't do that, can't you read the sign? I don't know, I love this song. I got to play the whole thing for you, and then you'll play it, loop it through your brain all right, okay, how about this? Some of you grew up in the 50s, before interstate highways, and most of the roads were just two-lane roads. And you remember, along the roads, there used to be these humorous poems, these red and white signs. Who put those out? Burma Shade. Oh, I love it. There are pages on the internet of Burma Shade sayings. Here's just a few. Drove too long, driver snoozing, what happened next is not amusing. How about this one? Cattle crossing means go slow. That old bull is some cow's beau. I love it. Don't leave safety too near chance. That's why belts are sold with pants. Many a forest used to stand where a lighted match got out of hand. Ooh. And my favorite, the midnight ride of Paul for beer led to a warmer hemisphere. I like it. I gotta think about it. I like it. Sign, sign, everywhere sign. Let's talk about that for a minute. You know, when I'm driving, Kathy says, you miss every sign. Did you see that sign? I said, what sign? You didn't see that sign? No, I didn't see that sign. She's constantly, we were driving from Lincoln, Nebraska to Erie, PA, where Kathy's mom lives. All you have to do is ride right along 80. 80 becomes 90. 90 and 80 separate. Continue on 90. You're a few minutes away from mom's house. Well, in Chicago, as you're going along, 80 kind of takes almost like a right-hand turn on a one lane, maybe it's two, but one or two lane exit off of that 4-lane highway. And I swear, there's only one sign that tells you that's coming. And I don't know how many times I drive past that exit. It's a straight road, and I pass it. And all of a sudden, you know, like 5 or 10 minutes later, I said, this doesn't look right. I don't know if you've ever done that. Signs are important. Imagine trying to navigate your way in an area unknown to you without signs, without GPS. My Christian education director, Susan Taylor, my last church, and I used to go to the Association of Presbyterian Christian Educators conferences every year. And when you got to Omaha to get to the airport, it wasn't too bad until you actually got into Omaha, and then you had to turn this way, and turn this way, and turn this way, and I always had to follow the signs. I couldn't always remember the route. We were coming back from one of these conferences one time. We landed in a blizzard. In a blizzard! We got out, got the ice and the snow off the windows, and then we started to head home. The only problem was that snow was that sticky kind of snow. Every sign in Omaha was covered up with snow. Oh, and Susan and I have trouble getting out. And that was before GPS. That was before GPS. Signs keep us aware of our surroundings. They help with directions. Signs, we oftentimes think of signs as placards or billboards, but there are other signs. Jesus mentioned signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. Go back with me to the year 1941. 2 American soldiers observed something unusual on their radar. They reported to their supervisor, who's a very young, inexperienced lieutenant. It's a peaceful Sunday morning. Nobody else around. And this young lieutenant, thinking that what they had seen on the radar were planes on maneuvers out of California, said, hey, don't worry about it. Well, they should have worried about it. What were these? What these 2 soldiers had actually seen were the first signs of 353 planes on their way to Pearl Harbor. And they reached there approximately 2 hours later. 2,403 Americans died. 1,178 were wounded. 18 ships were sunk or run aground, including 5 battleships. And all those Americans killed or wounded during the attack were actually non-combatants, given the fact that there was no state of war when that attack occurred. There was a sign, but the superior officer said, don't worry about it. Big mistake, because these men were not alert, they were not paying attention. A very critical sign was missed. A tragic, devastating air attack took place. I'm telling you, my friends, signs are important. So remember our text. It says that these signs will be seen in the sky. And then he says, people will faint, because at that time, they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and with great glory. And when these things begin to take place, what does he say? Stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. And in this passage, Jesus notes that there are signs that will precede the second coming of the Son of Man. Of course, we must remember that in another passage, Jesus says not even he himself knew when that day might be. And yet he said there will be signs. These signs will cause people to be terrified. The signs are listed there in the text. Things might get out of control. And what might you do? You'll be scared. You'll be afraid. We just got a puppy a couple Sundays ago. Little Calamity is her name. And she has a big sister, 7 years old. In the last few days, they have been getting very familiar with one another and chasing one another. Sometimes the big one just wants a little quiet time. Like, and that little one will tear away, run, and die under some piece of furniture and hide. That's the way we oftentimes respond to scary things in our own lives. We want to hide. Yet notice what Jesus says about these signs and events. He says, when these things begin to take place, stand up, lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. When these frightening things begin to take place, stand up, because your redemption is drawing near. Now, does that sound like Jesus is trying to frighten us? No. He doesn't say, duck, run for cover, dive under a piece of furniture, get crazy with fear. No. He says, stand up, lift up your heads. Your redemption is drawing near. The wonderful preacher Tony Campolo tells of a time when he was sitting in church and the preacher was saying, you must stay away from the movie theaters. The movie theaters are of Satan. Stay away. You will be called for account if you are found in a movie theater when Jesus comes back. Tony said every time he went to the movie, he was so fearful that Jesus might come back in the middle of the movie and he'd miss the ending of the movie. Now, there are a lot of people that want to drive fear in us about the second coming of Christ. I don't think that's my style, because that's not what I believe. I don't think we're supposed to be mixing faith with fear, especially during Advent. If you love Jesus, the thought of him coming anytime, whether at Christmas or at the end of time, ought to be an occasion for rejoicing, not being afraid. Remember Isaac's watchwords? Joy to the world. Joy to the world. The Lord is coming. I don't know about you, but that's my kind of religion. I'm not afraid that Jesus is coming. I'm lifting my head high. I'm proud of my King. I love Jesus because I know Jesus loves me. There's no need to fear. It's like the story one pastor tells about his seminary days. Since there was no gymnasium at the seminary, so the seminary students went over to a local high school to play basketball. There was a janitor there. He hung around while they played so that he could lock the doors when they were done and clean up the gym. The old janitor sat in the stands and he read while the students played. One of the seminaries went up to him one day and said, "So what are you reading?" He said, "The book of Revelation." With a bit of surprise, the seminarian asked, "The book of Revelation? Do you understand it?" "Oh, yes," said the janitor, "I understand it." "You understand the book of Revelation? Really?" "Okay. What does it mean?" And very quietly, the old janitor answered, "It means that Jesus is going to win." And that's all that matters. For those who love Jesus, Jesus is coming back. Jesus is going to win. And that's good news. No one loves us like Jesus loves us. And when these things begin to take place, Jesus says to us, stand up, lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. The call for this first Sunday in Advent is not a call for fear, but a call to faith. Of course, there will always be bad things that are happening in the world. I mean, listen to Linda's prayer this morning. Read the papers. Watch the news. But the truth of the matter is that God will never, ever forsake us. A few verses later in this text, Jesus says, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never, ever pass away." So does that mean that we can trust every promise that Christ has ever made to us? Of course it does. Including the promise that no matter what happens, God will give us a peace that passes all understanding if we will simply trust in Him. And we can trust His every promise, including the promise that He will never forget us, nor will He ever forsake us, including the promise that He has prepared a mansion for us in His kingdom, that where He is, so shall we be for all eternity. But then Jesus closes this section with a word of caution. He says, "Be careful, be on watch, or your hearts may be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life." Well, surely He's not talking about any of us here. Can't imagine any of you drinking or carousing or worrying during this holiday season. But what Christ is trying to say to us is that we live in a world of freedom. Some of us will bring heartache on ourselves or on those that we love by unhealthy behavior. Some of us are going to clog up our veins with unhealthy foods. Others are going to put stress on our hearts by unhealthy anxiety during this holiday season. But that's not God's will for us. It's simply a realistic appraisal of how human nature behaves. What Jesus says to us is be always on the watch. That's Jesus' final words to us this morning. Always be watchful. Always be prepared like Jeff Hostetler. Always be putting on your Christian attributes. Like a child waiting for Santa Claus, be on watch. Like a couple waiting the birth of their first child, be on watch. Like a family waiting for the return of their soldier after receiving word that he's safe and headed home, be on watch. Robbie Robbins was an Air Force pilot during the first Iraq War. And after his 300th mission, he was surprised by being given permission to immediately pull his entire crew together and fly his plane home. And these young military men flew across the ocean to Massachusetts. They docked their plane and then they did a long drive to western Pennsylvania together. They drove all night. And when Robbie's buddies finally dropped him off in his driveway, just after the sun had risen, he looked at his garage, and hanging there on the garage was a sign that said, "Welcome home, Dad." Robbie Robbins had to wonder to himself, how did my family know that I was coming home? No one had called. The crew themselves hadn't expected to be released so quickly from their command. Robbins relates that when he walked into the house, the kids, half dressed for school, screamed, "Daddy!" and ran towards him. His wife, Susan, came running down the hall. She looked terrific, hair fixed, makeup on, crisp yellow dress. And the first question he asked her was, "How did you know? How did you know?" And Susan said, "I did it." And through tears of joy, "We knew you tried to surprise us, so we were ready every day." That is our attitude during Advent. Christ is coming. We must be ready every day. This is a season for waiting on tiptoes. Our redemption is drawing near. The kingdom is drawing near. Christ's words will never pass away. You can trust Christ's promises forever. Therefore, every day, put on your very best Christian attributes and always, always be on watch. Amen.